I'm going to talk about my project named In the Clouds Lab. Thanks for the introduction. Starting with the issue, I would say it took some time for me to understand where I stand within this fellowship. So I ended up recognizing that coming from a climate activist and climate advocate background, I was first approaching digital rights, very concerned about learning everything I could about digital rights. And then I started realizing where the connections were. So the issue for me is that the lack of digital rights worsens marginalized group vulnerability to climate change in Latin America. And that there are two issues that for common people are very abstract and ephemeral. When you talk about climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, that's something that's hard to digest for many people. And same happens when you talk about digital and the cloud. And I'll talk more about it later. Also that there is a lack of digital rights and literacy that limits the possibilities to adapt to climate change. And I want to stress that my focus is on adaptation to climate change. From the climate change perspective, I think that there is a lot of focus on mitigation and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and not so much in what are the tools to adapt to climate change. And coming from Colombia with a Global South perspective, I think we have to talk more about adaptation to climate change. So what's the climate issue? There is a long history of environmental leaders in Latin America that, thanks through to new technologies and also because of the pandemic, had to adapt to new digital tools for community engagement. Usually community engagement within the environmental subjects happens in person, in your municipality, in the public school, in different places. But in the last years, people have used digital tools such as Facebook, WhatsApp to communicate and to do advocacy. Also, Latin America, as I already said, is highly vulnerable to climate change, and for climate justice to materialize, it is necessary to understand the risk dynamics on the ground, to understand what climate change means from a human rights perspective, and what can we do with digital tools. At the same time, information that is up to date is inaccessible. There are many challenges. There is a huge internet coverage gap in high vulnerable areas. Regular updates of climate data are not happening. And there is also a disconnection between local knowledge and the science of climate change. So regarding that, there is also a digital issue. There is, as I already said, a lack of access and connectivity in highly vulnerable areas, lack of digital skills and literacy. If you go to rural parts of South America, there is also a language barrier. And I'm going to present all the things that I've done as part of the In the Clouds Lab in English, but I recognize that many people in South America and most of those who are putting their bodies for climate justice do not speak English. And that is a huge barrier when you're trying to approach a subject as climate change. And there's also lack of recognition of local content and traditional knowledge. So how did I get to this issue? By looking at many different things at the intersection of data and climate, digital rights and climate, open mapping. I remember our first conversations about the gentrification of the internet and how that refers to different things, but how that could also be related to to climate action, techno-precarity. At some point, Catherine said, like, you should stop reading and start like creating your project. Then I had the chance to interview people both on the digital rights space and in the climate change space. There are some interviews coming in the next weeks as well, to understand how Latin American people are understanding this connection and if they see any connection at all. So that's how the In the Clouds project was born. And I understood that what I wanted to show is that digital rights can be a tool for climate justice. So just showing here the logo of the lab, what does it mean to be in the clouds? And why am I choosing that term? In Spanish, en las nubes is something that it's usually related to something negative, like not very tangible, not very productive, so not in contact with reality, in a condition of absent-mindedness, something impractical. But I think that the mindful observation of what might seem abstract, such as climate change and greenhouse gases, or digital rights happening in this space, known as the internet, can reveal meeting points that we had not seen before. And why am I talking about the clouds? As Catherine mentioned in my bio, I had the opportunity to lead the first climate change and future generations litigation case in Colombia. And the clouds played a fundamental role in that, in explaining to the judge and to the Supreme Court the relation between human rights and climate change. So basically, to explain it in very simple terms, the Amazon rainforest produces most of the water that we consume in the Andes region. And you're wondering, like, how is that happening? So basically, all the vapor that is created thanks to the tropical forest, to the rainforest, travels with the help of the wind to the Andes, and those flying rivers give us water. So we are not thinking about the role of clouds in climate change, and at the same time, digital rights happen in the cloud. So I prepared, or the objective is to continue preparing these very simple materials that you could share through WhatsApp, through your social media, if you're a climate activist or an environmental justice activist, so people can start understanding what is this Digital Rights for Climate Justice project. So this is basically, or I'm proposing a hybrid space for dialogue around these invisible issues that live in the clouds. And I play a little with the term. So the cloud, this not physical entity where the network of remote servers around the globe operate the internet, is where our digital life happens. So it's not something that we can see. It's not a place where we are going. This happens in this abstract place. At the same time, the clouds, as I already mentioned, have a big role in climate change. So my idea is to prepare these infographics on what lies in this intersection of digital and climate clouds, and what opportunities are there in this space to build a sustainable world where digital rights are used in benefit of climate adaptation and mitigation. Although my focus, as I already said, is on climate adaptation. This is just like an example of those materials. And the idea is to explore all the terms that are around digital rights and climate justice, to explain what digital rights mean when you're a climate activist, to explain also what climate justice is. And this is an experiment. That's why I decided to call it a lab. for dialogue around digital rights for climate justice. It's also a seat for a digital community. My focus is on women and youth. And the idea is to prepare these snapshots of easy to digest information for climate activists. Some of the learnings, the first one was to try and fail fast. My project proposal at the beginning was very different. I planned to provide digital tools for adaptation for the Colombian government, then realized that 10 months were not enough time for that, and that I should also inform myself about digital rights before trying to sell something to the government. That it's important to break silos in the global south, to have conversations between digital professionals and climate activists. It is also like one of the learnings for me was to understand where I'm speaking from, and that it is okay to have different timelines. I remember in one of the sessions from this cohort, I asked Chris what were his reflections on the issue of an internet free from fossil fuels when you come from the global south and you don't even have access to the internet. And we had a great conversation about that. So for me, maybe in Colombia, we have to take some steps before having the conversations that the Green Web Foundation is already having. And I also learned that there is a community, and the meeting in Costa Rica was key for that. What changed? So for me, the main lesson is that there is hope and tools after climate litigation. I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago a group of teenagers filed a litigation case against most European countries on climate change. And although having a victory before the courts is good for climate action, implementation is still a challenge. So having been part of a climate litigation case, after winning, I realized that there were not enough tools, and now I'm learning that digital rights can be a tool for implementing the cases. This also opened a door for relating to a different community, especially through the Open Climate Initiative that Shannon and Michelle lead. And I see myself as an intermediary. So the same way I had to understand climate change coming from an environmental justice background and translate that to a court, now I see the need to translate digital rights for a climate activist and climate advocates audience. On the side, I also work with the private sector, and I shared in a previous session that in my work, I managed to convince two groups to work together on a blog on open data for climate resilience. So we're starting to have that conversation, and yeah, I see this as the beginning of something. So my plan is to continue with the material prep. This was just a snapshot of what I'm doing. I'm preparing around 10 to 12 reels to share in social media. I have an in-person workshop in December in Bogota to have a soft launch of the lab. And I'm preparing a pitch to sell this idea to an established organization who might be interested in temporarily adopt the lab. I'm thinking about the sustainability in the long term. And that's it. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.